J. Independence of the judiciary. In view of their significance in the event of legal challenges in the context of the electoral process, some stakeholders expressed the view that the government compromises the judiciary. A key justification for this perception was information received from these stakeholders that the judiciary recently received large financial and material incentives, which the stakeholders viewed as an attempt by the government to buy the loyalty and allegiance of the judiciary. K. Alleged intimidation of voters. The mission was informed that the rural vote may be compromised by alleged intimidation attributed to a group called Forever Associates Zimbabwe FAZ, which is said to be a quasi-security intelligence organization. The group was said to have been deployed towards and around 36,000 villages. Allegations were that people were intimidated to vote in a particular manner and were warned that it would be easy to determine who voted against certain parties. L. Postal voting controversy. There was considerable concern from the opposition and other stakeholders that postal voting by the officers of the Zimbabwe Republic Police was compromised by the alleged coerced voting. There were allegations that police officers undertaking postal voting were coerced to vote in a particular way in the presence of their supervisors, thus compromising the secrecy of the vote. M. Coverage of the elections by state-owned media. It was the contention of several stakeholders that the state-owned media houses remained biased against the opposition political parties and their candidates during the campaigns. While the mission noted that some improvement compared to the 2018 electoral processes, was also noted that the content of the public broadcaster and the state-owned newspapers were in favor of one political party, contrary to the relevant provisions of the Constitution, the Electoral Act, and the revised SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections, which require state-owned media to be impartial. Now, let us put across our observations on election days 23rd to the 24th of August 2023. On the election days, the SADC Election and Electoral Observation Mission observed the voting process in 10 provinces of the Republic of Zimbabwe. The deployed observer teams covered 172 polling stations in their respective areas. The political contestants have continued to call for peace during this election period and after. The CEO observed the following critical aspects at the 172 polling stations that we visited. A, the environment at the polling stations was relatively calm and peaceful. B, several voters expressed concern due to a lack of or late arrival of ballot papers and poor administration at some polling stations. However, voters remained patient to exercise their constitutional right to vote. C, professional and attentive police presence enhanced the overall peace and secure environment in all the polling stations observed. D, 64% of the voting stations observed open on time, 36% did not open on time for the 7 a.m. stipulated opening time. Some polling stations opened more than 12 hours after the stipulated time. The reason provided by ZEC for the unprecedented development was the unavailability of ballot papers, particularly for the local authority elections, and also due to previous litigation. The challenge was, however, specific to Harare. The challenge was, however, only specific to Harare and Bulawayo provinces. Due to the delays, some voters left without casting their votes, while others remained in the lengthy queues throughout the day and night. By 6 a.m. on the 24th of August 2023, some voters in these two provinces had still not voted. Consequently, these delays also had a knock-on effect as they dissuaded voters from voting in the first place. Against this observation, we further note the following. Number 1, Section 52, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act provides that for any election, the ZEC should ensure that every constituency elections officer is provided with polling booths or voting compartments and ballot boxes, and shall provide papers, including ballot papers. 2, before election day, ZEC had assured our mission and other stakeholders that all necessary voting materials, including ballot papers, were available and ready for use. This communication was made in the context of Section 52A, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act, which requires ZEC to provide information on the number of ballot papers and publication of details regarding ballot papers. Based on these two considerations, the subsequent information from ZEC that they did not have adequate ballot papers has the unfortunate effect of creating doubts about the credibility of this process. E. The voters' roll was unavailable at 1% of the polling stations observed and was therefore not displayed outside the polling stations for the convenience of the voters and verification by party candidate agents. F. During the voting period and at 26% of the polling stations observed, not all voters who turned out to vote could vote. The reasons advanced for this included, number 1, voters were identified, but their names were not found on the voters' roll. 2, it was not possible to establish the voter's identity. 3, voters were at the wrong polling station. And 4, voters did not have a national identity card or passport, or due to absence of an official witness confirming an elector's identity. G, 8% of the polling stations observed were not accessible to voters living with disabilities. At 50% of the polling stations, voters living with disabilities, the elderly, the pregnant women were not given priority to vote. I, in 3% of polling stations observed, indelible ink was not checked on the voters before allowing them to cast their vote. J, at 97% of the polling stations observed, voting was free from usual irregularities. K, voting proceeded in an orderly manner at 95% of the polling stations observed. L, ballot boxes did not remain locked and or sealed at 2% of the polling boxes that were observed. M, as a result of the excessive delays in the opening of polling stations in Harare and Bulawayo provinces, at least 36% of the voting stations observed did not close at the scheduled closing of 19 hours, while some had not even opened by that time. It was announced that voting would be extended to proceed into 24th August 2023 to compensate for the late opening. And in previous stakeholder consultations, a shadowy organization that I've already referred to as Forever Associate Zimbabwe was accused of conducting a countrywide exercise of electoral intimidation. Our observers confirmed the existence of this group, as its officials or agents were easily identifiable at some polling stations as they were dressed in regalia emblazoned with the FAR's name and were accredited electoral local observers. These and other unidentified persons who were not polling officials were also observed taking down the voters' names before they cast their votes. In some areas, voters were intimidated by the actions of these individuals. Or, the mission observed the closing on the vote counting processes. A proper analysis of these two processes shall be provided in the final seal report. Number 4, recommended improvements in the electoral process. At this juncture, allow me to recall that SIOM is continuing the process of electoral observation in the post-election phase. As such, the mission will not be rendering comprehensive recommendations and detailed qualifications of the election at this stage. However, the mission has observed the following areas of the electoral process and system that relevant stakeholders may wish to consider improving. Number 1, access to the voters' roll. In order to improve perceptions amongst the public, political parties and candidates, ZEC is advised to strictly follow the provisions of the Constitution on transparency, access to information, and time-shierly avail the voters' roll in accordance with the stipulations under the Electoral Act. 2, nomination fees. In order to enhance the openness and inclusivity of the political process, ZEC is urged to engage with all stakeholders in the process of revising nomination fees for the candidates and attempt to benchmark the revised fees in the context of the SADC region and Zimbabwe's economic realities. 3, state-owned media coverage. The relevant media regulatory authorities are urged to ensure the implementation of measures that require impartiality in the coverage of political events by state-owned media. And 4, voting materials. ZEC is urged to strengthen transparency in the procurement process and delivery of all voting materials, including ballot papers, and put in place a monitoring system that includes the participation and verification by electoral stakeholders. In addition, there is need for the Electoral Commission or Electoral Act to be revised to put in place clear frameworks and timeframes within which these processes should be completed. Number 5, participation of women. Effective and practical measures should now be put in place at the earliest sitting of the next Parliament to enhance the equal participation of women as candidates in electoral processes. In conclusion, the mission observed that the pre-election and voting phases on 23rd to the 24th August 2023 harmonized elections were peaceful and calm. However, for reasons outlined above in this report, the mission noted that some aspects of the harmonized elections fell short of the requirements of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the Electoral Act, and the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections of 2021. The mission commends the people of Zimbabwe for maintaining a peaceful political environment during the pre-election period and on voting day itself. The mission will release its final report after the validation and proclamation of final results, as provided for in the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. The final report will be shared with the ZEC and all stakeholders. In terms of the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections, our long-term observers will remain on the ground to continue with the post-election observation until the 1st of September 2023. The SEAC shall return at an appropriate time to undertake a post-election review to determine the extent to which the recommendations of SIOM have been implemented and the nature of the support, if any, that the member state holding elections may require from SADC region to implement these proposals. In the event of any electoral disputes, the mission appeals to all contestants to channel their concerns through established legal procedures and processes. The mission urges all political parties and the people of Zimbabwe and all the stakeholders to allow the ZEC to announce the final results as legally mandated. May God bless Zimbabwe. May God bless SADC. May God bless Africa. Merci beaucoup. Obrigado, asante sana, tatenda. I thank you.